Ma'am, step out of the car now.
Officer, this is my car and my home. Please check my ID before proceeding.
I said step out. You're being detained for vehicle theft and resisting arrest.
I am Judge Patricia Williams, a federal judge. Please verify.
The dashboard camera captured everything, every single moment of what was about to become the most expensive traffic stop in American history. It was 2:15 inches the afternoon on a quiet Tuesday when Judge Patricia Williams pulled into her own driveway after a long day in federal court. She had just finished presiding over a complex civil rights case, ironically enough, and was looking forward to spending a peaceful evening at home with her family. Judge Patricia Williams was no ordinary person. At 52 years old, she had dedicated her entire adult life to the pursuit of justice. She grew up in a working-class neighborhood where her parents instilled in her the values of hard work, education, and standing up for what's right. After graduating summa cum laude from Harvard Law School, she spent 15 years as a prosecutor, then another decade in private practice before being appointed to the federal bench by the president himself. She was known throughout the legal community for her fairness, her sharp intellect, and her unwavering commitment to constitutional principles. Colleagues described her as someone who treated every case with the gravity it deserved, whether it involved a multi-million-dollar corporate dispute or a simple civil rights violation. She had presided over hundreds of cases, many of them involving police misconduct and racial discrimination. That Tuesday afternoon, Judge Williams was driving her black Mercedes sedan through her upscale suburban neighborhood. She had purchased the car just 6 months earlier as a reward for herself after receiving a Distinguished Service Award from the State Bar Association. The neighborhood where she lived was quiet, tree-lined, and expensive. She had worked her entire life to afford a home there, and she took pride in the fact that her success had opened doors for her family that previous generations could never have imagined. As she turned into her driveway, she noticed a police cruiser following behind her. She thought nothing of it initially. Police officers patrolled the neighborhood regularly, and she had always appreciated their presence as a sign of safety and security. She gathered her briefcase from the passenger seat and was about to exit her vehicle when she heard the sharp sound of a car door slamming behind her. Officer William Thompson had been on the force for 8 years. His personnel file would later reveal a troubling pattern of complaints, most of them involving interactions with black motorists. But on that Tuesday afternoon, he was about to make a decision that would change both his life and Judge Williams' life forever. He approached her vehicle with his hand resting on his service weapon, his expression stern and suspicious. Judge Williams rolled down her window as Officer Thompson reached her car. She expected a friendly greeting, maybe a question about whether she had seen anything unusual in the neighborhood. What she got instead was an aggressive demand to see her license and registration, delivered in a tone that immediately put her on edge. She asked politely why she was being stopped, explaining that she had simply pulled into her own driveway. Officer Thompson's response would later be described by legal experts as a textbook example of racial profiling in action. He told her that her vehicle matched the description of a stolen car that had been reported in the area. When she calmly explained that this was her own car and pointed to her house just a few feet away, he became more aggressive. He demanded that she step out of the vehicle immediately and accused her of being evasive. Now here's where Judge Williams made a decision that would prove crucial to everything that followed. Instead of becoming confrontational, she remained calm and compliant. Her years of experience in the courtroom had taught her the importance of maintaining composure even in the most challenging situations. She knew that her behavior in this moment could mean the difference between a simple misunderstanding and something much more serious. She stepped out of her car slowly, keeping her hands visible at all times. She calmly repeated that this was her vehicle and her home, and asked Officer Thompson to verify the license plate number against whatever stolen car report he claimed to be investigating. This reasonable request seemed to anger him even more. He told her to put her hands behind her back and began reaching for his handcuffs. Judge Williams asked what crime she was being arrested for. Officer Thompson's answer would later become a key piece of evidence in the federal lawsuit that followed. He told her she was being arrested for vehicle theft and resisting arrest, even though she had been completely cooperative throughout the entire encounter. As he placed the handcuffs on her wrists, she calmly stated her name, her position as a federal judge, and requested that he verify her identity before proceeding. Officer Thompson either didn't hear her or chose to ignore what she was saying. He guided her to the back of his patrol car while she continued to explain who she was and asked him to check her credentials. Her briefcase remained on the ground next to her Mercedes, containing court documents that would have immediately verified her identity. Her judicial identification card was in her purse, which was still inside her car. As she sat in the back of the patrol car, Judge Williams remained remarkably composed. She had spent her career dealing with law enforcement officers, both good and bad. She understood the system better than most people, and she knew that this situation was spiraling out of control based on assumptions and prejudices rather than facts. What she didn't know yet was that several of her neighbors had witnessed the entire encounter and were already making phone calls. Mrs. Eleanor Davis, who lived directly across the street, had been watering her garden when she saw the police car pull up behind Judge Williams's Mercedes. She watched the entire interaction unfold and immediately knew something was wrong. She had lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years and had watched Judge Williams move in 3 years earlier. She knew exactly who her neighbor was and what she did for a living. Mrs. Davis called her husband, who was a retired attorney, and described what she was witnessing. He told her to start recording everything she could see and to call the police department immediately to report what appeared to be a case of mistaken identity. By the time Mrs. Davis reached for her phone to start recording, Judge Williams was already in the back of the patrol car. Another neighbor, James Mitchell, was walking his dog when he saw the commotion. He recognized Judge Williams immediately because his own brother had appeared before her in court 2 years earlier in a civil matter. He approached the scene cautiously and tried to explain to Officer Thompson that he had made a mistake, that the woman he had arrested was a federal judge who lived in the house right there. Officer Thompson told Mr. Mitchell to step back and mind his own business. He said he had a stolen vehicle report and was following proper procedure. When Mr. Mitchell persisted, explaining that he personally knew the woman in the patrol car was Judge Williams, Officer Thompson threatened to arrest him for interfering with a police investigation. Quick question for you watching. Have you ever witnessed something like this happening in your community? Type yes in the comments if you have. The situation was about to get much worse before it got better. Officer Thompson radioed for backup, claiming he had arrested a suspect in a vehicle theft case who was now claiming to be a federal judge. His tone suggested he thought this was some kind of elaborate ruse. Within minutes, 2 additional patrol cars arrived on the scene, their red and blue lights flashing and creating a spectacle that drew even more neighbors outside to see what was happening. By now, Judge Williams had been sitting in the back of that patrol car for almost 20 minutes. The handcuffs were cutting into her wrists, and she could feel the eyes of her entire neighborhood watching this humiliating spectacle unfold. She had presided over cases involving police misconduct, but experiencing it firsthand was entirely different. The powerlessness she felt in that moment would stay with her for years to come. The backup officers who arrived seemed confused about why they had been called. Officer Sarah Martinez, who had been on the force for 12 years, immediately recognized that something was off about the entire situation. She approached Officer Thompson and asked for a briefing on what had happened. His explanation was scattered and inconsistent. He claimed he had received a report about a stolen black Mercedes, but when Officer Martinez asked for the specific details of that report, Thompson became evasive. Officer Martinez walked over to the patrol car where Judge Williams was being held. Through the window, she could see a well-dressed, professional woman who clearly did not fit the profile of a car thief. Judge Williams looked directly at her and calmly repeated her name and position. This time, someone was actually listening. Officer Martinez returned to Thompson and suggested they verify the woman's identity before proceeding any further. She pointed out that if this woman really was a federal judge, they were about to face the kind of legal nightmare that could end careers. Thompson insisted that she was lying, that criminals often made up elaborate stories to avoid arrest. He said he wanted to take her to the station for proper processing. That's when Mrs. Davis approached the scene with her phone in hand. She had been recording everything she could see from her front yard, and she walked directly up to Officer Martinez. She introduced herself as the defendant's neighbor and explained that the woman in the patrol car was indeed Judge Patricia Williams, who lived in the white colonial house right behind them. She offered to show Martinez her recordings and provide contact information for other neighbors who could verify the judge's identity. Officer Martinez immediately understood the gravity of the situation. She radioed dispatch and requested that they run a check on Patricia Williams to verify her identity and position. Within minutes, the response came back confirming that she was indeed a sitting federal judge. The dispatcher's voice carried a tone of urgency as she relayed the information, and Martinez could hear the concern in her colleague's voice. Thompson's reaction to this news was telling. Instead of immediately apologizing and releasing Judge Williams, he became defensive. He insisted that she should have identified herself properly from the beginning. He claimed that her behavior had been suspicious and that he had followed proper protocol. Officer Martinez knew better. She had seen the dashboard camera footage being recorded throughout the entire encounter, and she knew that Thompson's version of events would not hold up under scrutiny. Judge Williams was finally released from the patrol car after 35 minutes of detention. As the handcuffs came off, she rubbed her wrists where the metal had left red marks on her skin. She remained composed, but those who knew her well could see the controlled anger in her eyes. She thanked Officer Martinez for her professionalism and asked for the names and badge numbers of all officers involved. Thompson made one final mistake that would prove costly in the legal proceedings that followed. As Judge Williams gathered her belongings and prepared to enter her home, he approached her and suggested that the entire incident could be forgotten if she was willing to overlook what he called a simple misunderstanding. He implied that filing a complaint would be unnecessary and that these things happened all the time. Judge Williams looked at him with the same steely gaze she reserved for the most egregious offenders who appeared in her courtroom. She told him that what had happened was not a misunderstanding but a clear violation of her constitutional rights. She explained that his actions were exactly the kind of behavior that eroded public trust in law enforcement and that she would be pursuing every legal remedy available to her. The neighbors who had witnessed the incident began approaching Judge Williams to offer their support and provide their contact information as potential witnesses. Mrs. Davis handed her the video she had recorded on her phone. Mr. Mitchell gave her a written statement describing what he had seen. Even people who had never spoken to her before came forward to express their outrage at what had happened in their neighborhood. Officer Thompson left the scene that day believing he had simply made a mistake that would blow over in a few days. He had no idea that he had just set in motion a legal process that would expose years of misconduct and cost his department nearly $1 million. The dashcam footage from his patrol car had captured everything, including his refusal to listen when multiple people tried to correct his error. Judge Williams spent that evening calling her family and close friends to inform them about what had happened. Her daughter, who was a first-year law student at the time, was so upset she wanted to drive home immediately. Her husband, a physician, was furious and wanted to file complaints with every agency he could think of. But Judge Williams knew that rushing into legal action without careful preparation would be a mistake. Instead, she did what she had trained her entire career to do. She gathered evidence. She reviewed the applicable laws. She consulted with attorneys who specialized in civil rights cases. She documented every detail of what had happened while it was still fresh in her memory. She knew that if she was going to seek justice, she needed to do it the right way. The next morning, Judge Williams called in sick to court for the first time in over 3 years. She spent the day meeting with attorneys and civil rights organizations. Word of what had happened began to spread through the legal community like wildfire. Federal judges are afforded certain protections and respect precisely because of their role in upholding the Constitution. When one of them is subjected to the very discrimination they work to prevent, it sends shockwaves through the entire system. Officer Thompson reported to work the next day as if nothing had happened. He filled out his incident report, describing the previous day's events as a routine traffic stop that resulted in a case of mistaken identity. He failed to mention that he had ignored multiple attempts by the suspect and witnesses to clarify the situation. He also failed to mention that he had detained a federal judge for over half an hour based on nothing more than racial profiling. His supervisor, Sergeant David Morrison, reviewed the report and immediately knew something was wrong. Morrison had been in law enforcement for over 20 years, and he could recognize a sanitized incident report when he saw one. The basic facts didn't add up. Why would someone steal a car only to drive it directly to their own driveway? Why would a car thief calmly provide identification and claim to be a federal judge? And most importantly, why hadn't Thompson verified the stolen vehicle report before making an arrest? Morrison pulled the dash cam footage and watched the entire encounter unfold. What he saw made his stomach drop. He could clearly see Judge Williams remaining calm and cooperative throughout the entire interaction. He could hear her repeatedly identifying herself and asking Thompson to verify her credentials. He could see the neighbors approaching to vouch for her identity. And most damning of all, he could hear Thompson's dismissive and increasingly aggressive responses to everyone who tried to correct his obvious error. By Thursday morning, Morrison was sitting in Chief Rebecca Walsh's office, playing the footage for her on his laptop. Chief Walsh had been leading the department for 6 years and had worked hard to improve community relations and reduce complaints about officer conduct. As she watched the video, she realized that all of that progress was about to be undone by one officer's spectacular failure in judgment. The department's legal counsel was called in immediately. Attorney Michael Rodriguez took one look at the footage and told Chief Walsh that they were facing a potential federal civil rights lawsuit that could bankrupt the department. He explained that detaining a federal judge based on racial profiling wasn't just a public relations disaster. It was a constitutional violation of the highest order. Meanwhile, Judge Williams had retained the services of civil rights attorney David Chen, whose firm had won several high-profile cases against police departments across the country. Chen reviewed the evidence Judge Williams had gathered and told her that she had one of the strongest cases he had ever seen. The dashcam footage alone was enough to prove racial profiling, but combined with Thompson's personnel file and the witness statements, it painted a picture of systemic misconduct that had been allowed to continue unchecked. Chen filed the federal lawsuit on Friday morning, exactly 1 week after the incident occurred. The complaint alleged violations of Judge Williams' 4th and 14th Amendment rights, claiming that she had been subjected to an unlawful seizure based solely on her race. The lawsuit named Officer Thompson, Sergeant Morrison for inadequate supervision, and the entire police department for maintaining policies that enabled racial profiling. The filing made immediate headlines in local news outlets. A federal judge suing her own community's police department was unprecedented in the area. Legal experts who were interviewed about the case universally agreed that Judge Williams had strong grounds for her lawsuit. Professor Linda Martinez from the local law school told reporters that the dashcam footage appeared to show a textbook case of racial profiling. Officer Thompson was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of both the internal investigation and the federal lawsuit. For the first time since the incident occurred, he began to understand the magnitude of what had happened. He hired his own attorney, who reviewed the evidence and delivered some sobering news. Thompson was likely going to lose his job, face potential criminal charges for violating Judge Williams' civil rights, and could be personally liable for damages in the federal lawsuit. The internal affairs investigation concluded within 2 weeks. Investigator Captain Lisa Rodriguez found that Thompson had violated multiple department policies, including those governing traffic stops, use of force, and professional conduct. Her report noted that Thompson had failed to verify the stolen vehicle report, ignored attempts by multiple witnesses to correct his error, and showed a pattern of targeting black motorists that violated both department policy and federal law. Thompson's personnel file revealed a troubling history that had somehow escaped serious scrutiny. Over his 8 years on the force, he had received 14 complaints from citizens, 12 of which involved allegations of racial bias or excessive force. Most of these complaints had been dismissed with minimal investigation or resulted in minor disciplinary actions like additional training or written reprimands. The pattern was unmistakable. Thompson had stopped black motorists at a rate nearly 4 times higher than white drivers, despite working in a predominantly white district. His searches of black drivers yielded contraband at the same rate as searches of white drivers, proving that his increased attention to black motorists wasn't based on legitimate law enforcement concerns. Captain Rodriguez's investigation also revealed that Thompson's supervisors had failed to recognize or address this pattern of behavior. Annual performance reviews consistently rated him as satisfactory or above average, with no mention of the citizen complaints or statistical disparities in his enforcement activities. The department's early warning system, designed to flag officers with problematic behavior patterns, had somehow failed to identify Thompson as a concern. Chief Walsh made the decision to terminate Thompson's employment before the internal investigation was even complete. The evidence was overwhelming, and she knew that keeping him on the force would expose the department to additional liability. Thompson was fired on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after he had arrested Judge Williams in her own driveway. Thompson's firing made front-page news, and the story began attracting national attention. Civil rights organizations praised Judge Williams for her courage in pursuing legal action, noting that many victims of police misconduct lack the resources or knowledge to effectively challenge such violations. The NAACP issued a statement calling the case a perfect example of how racial profiling affects people at every level of society. Legal experts began analyzing the case as a potential landmark in civil rights law. Professor James Washington from Howard University Law School explained to reporters that federal judges occupy a unique position in the legal system, and violations of their civil rights carry additional constitutional implications. He predicted that the case could result in significant monetary damages and might influence how courts handle racial profiling cases in the future. The discovery phase of the lawsuit revealed even more damaging information about the police department's practices. Chen's legal team subpoenaed 5 years of traffic stop data, complaint records, and training materials. What they found was a department that had systematically failed to address racial bias among its officers. Statistical analysis of traffic stop data showed that black drivers in the community were stopped at rates significantly higher than their representation in the local population. They were also more likely to be searched, more likely to be arrested, and more likely to have force used against them during encounters with police. Despite these disparities, department leadership had taken no meaningful action to address the obvious problems. The lawsuit also uncovered evidence that Thompson wasn't the only problematic officer in the department. 3 other officers showed similar patterns of racially biased enforcement, and all of them had received minimal discipline despite multiple citizen complaints. The department's training records revealed that officers received only basic instruction on constitutional rights and racial bias, with no ongoing education or accountability measures. Judge Williams found herself in the unusual position of being both a victim of misconduct and an expert on the legal system designed to address such violations. She used her platform to speak publicly about the need for police